Hello, huddlers. I am excited to welcome you to our eighth bonus slash career huddle focused on some aspect of generative AI. Last month, Lisa Adams shared how she's using AI to develop strategic options. And if you missed that one, we'll be sure to share the link in chat. This month, our special guest is Ajay Manglani, a veteran marketer with extensive experience in AI. Ajay has helped marketing executives, held marketing executive roles at Cognitos, Chargebee, and Salesforce, which you may have heard of, among others. And today we're going to tap into his expertise in using Gen AI within a revenue marketing engine that delivers predictable, scalable growth. And so with that, Ajay, welcome. How are you and where are you today?
Thanks for having me, Drew, and thanks for a very kind introduction. I'm doing great, and I'm dialing in today from sunny Bay Area, California. It's beautiful out there.
Awesome. Well, it's beautiful here in New York too. So there it is. So look, we've talked before we turn the mic on, we heard from various huddlers where they are in the stage. A lot of folks are just experimenting. It's a lot on content, and we promised that we would sort of move this beyond content. So first, maybe you could talk about how you've gained this expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've been fortunate to have gained the generative AI and a lot of AI expertise through three different experiences I have had in my career. First, as a marketing leader for AI products, I was fortunate to lead the global demand generation for Salesforce Einstein product. And in my current role with generative AI for automation solution like Cognitos, I have taken the company from zero to literally where we are today in terms of the growth stage. And in between, I have also had the predictive analytics roles for the products. So that's one on the product side of it. Second, because I was in the midst of generative AI product marketing myself, I got exposed to all of these LLMs way back when. So I still remember my first access coming in March 2023 for generative AI, which was a fascinating thing for me. And then since then, I've been using a lot of products like Jasper. These were the wrappers to the GPTs at the time, and a number of other products. And then the third experience that I've had is it's almost like machine learning and predictive analytics, which we don't talk as much today because they sound like so old days. But I have been doing that almost for a decade now as part of both my agency as well as in-house role. So back in the day, like 2014, I still remember we did the predictive when I heard somebody saying propensity to buy models for one of the second largest financial companies. So all in all, I feel fortunate to have been touching AI for quite some time now.
And so as you were talking, it made me think of, so the holy grail for a CMO is to be able to walk into the CFO's office and say, hi, I'm going to do marketing that is predictable. It's going to deliver predictable revenue, right? I mean, and that you can build that model so that you can see, we're going to spend this amount of money, and the result of it is going to be this amount of leads in the pipeline, which is going to close. And therefore, we have this predictable, repeatable, maybe even scalable model. So, and that context existed before generative AI. But I feel like the sort of world of generative AI is potentially, and this is where you come in, could dramatically change that. And so let's sort of get there and talk about a revenue marketing engine in general, and then we can get to how generative AI will put it on steroids.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, before we go into the generative AI piece of it, let's just take a step back and for the audience here, try to level set what do we actually mean by revenue marketing engine, right? Most of us have heard the term demand generation in our marketing leadership roles, right? And there are quite distinctive differences between the two disciplines as I have seen it, right? First of all, demand generation could vary in terms of scope and definition from an organization to organization. I saw that myself in three different organizations that I was part of. But at a minimum, I described demand generation when I was leading it is basically one, responsible for demand capture and demand creation, right? And what it really means is focusing on lead generation and conversion, and then primarily trying to accelerate that, right? And in terms of the marketing sub-function, demand generation will have something like inbound, outbound, growth, digital marketing, campaigns, and the likes, right? And ultimately, you want to make sure, to your point, Drew, at a minimum, demand generation creates the pipeline that the sales can then take and try to run with it, right? Now, on the other hand, starting last 3 years or so, I have started to practice this motion of revenue marketing rather than demand generation, which almost is a function where you try to bring every single sub-function of marketing that has the direct correlation with the revenue organization. And for audience here, you might have heard this term revenue organization opposed to the sales organization these days, where you have sales, customer success, partner ecosystem, and most likely the revenue strategy and operations functions together. So how do you design your organization from marketing side to map very closely with all of those functions? And that has some massive impact in terms of the accountability that the revenue marketing can drive, which is number one, that makes sure that marketing is not just responsible for demand creation and capture, i.e. the pipeline generation, but also the pipeline acceleration and conversion, right? And that's where a lot of the goodwill starts to get developed. Number two, it also makes sure that we are not just stopping at the prospect level marketing only, but we are going much beyond in terms of the upsell and expansion marketing from our customers, right? So the whole motion around advocacy gets expanded to literally the expansion, the campaigns that will run through the CXOs and whatnot, right? The biggest important role that this large organization revenue marketing plays is in terms of the partner ecosystem, right? A lot of the revenue now in these days when markets are efficient or trying to be efficient, we focus on the revenue side coming from the partners as well. Now you put all of that together, that's where your revenue marketing organization is, right? To level set. Now, to your point, that holy grail is difficult to accomplish, let alone envision. I have been fortunate, humbly, that we in my last two organizations were as close to as we can possibly be with all the tech, tool, and data that we have in terms of achieving that. And as a matter of fact, what I did was, and the community might have seen my article on LinkedIn, I published how we can come revenue marketing as well as the revenue organization together and go through what I call the playbook, which can generate the predictable and scalable revenue, right? I can talk about that, but yeah, that is the
So let's
first.
pause there for a second because there was a lot to digest. And it's funny, when we were talking about revenue marketing yesterday, I just thought, oh my God, yet another term. I mean, and we're just keep adding different things to marketing. And I thought, oh, well, if I'm not in revenue marketing, then or the revenue org, well, what am I? An appendage that doesn't matter? And the names of these things start to matter. So my first blush was, oh, can't we do something else so that, because we're all in the business of driving revenue. Having said that, what really helped me was when you said sales, customer service, partner, and ops are all working together as one group because all of those contribute revenue. So we're not just looking at net new, which is often the focus. We're not just looking at direct sales, but we're also talking about the channel. So I get the structure. I'm still not convinced that the name is right, but I appreciate the structure that you're describing here. So, all right. So now we're going to pull so go turn to what the playbook looks like.
Yeah. So playbook very briefly, and not sure, Drew, if you want to pull it on the screen, it's okay if you don't want to, but I want to highlight a couple of things. One, this is a playbook, not the playbook that I have developed based on my own experience of working in both large and growth stage organizations, basically. So, it will vary. Secondly, this is based on primarily the B2B high tech industry experience that I come from, right? I have, however, seen that this playbook for B2B business has applied very well on most other B2B industries. I have had colleagues and peers who have applied this in their supply chain B2B as well as their insurance verticals, and it has worked fairly well with few adjustments here and there. But essentially, the playbook has 10 steps, and without going into the details of each and every step, I'll just bucket it into three pieces, right? And the team can look at from 1 to 10. The first bucket really is what I call the alignment and accountability. Is, how do you design the marketing organization structure, primarily in this case, the revenue marketing organization? The second bucket is really focusing on the audience and moving around that. And the third bucket is just scale. Let me elaborate very briefly on each of them from the revenue marketing
Go for
perspective.
it.
As marketers, we all talk about following our customers, right? That's our first primary thing. I would like to start even always from our internal customer first, which is our revenue organization. Now, for the purposes of this call, I will mention sales organization is much broader as revenue. So then I want to make sure that I design my organization as closely as possible to my revenue counterpart, right? So that's why you see the precedents of GTMs come in and play. And what I have done lately in my last couple of roles is really align the roles. Two in a box is another framework that I use very closely with the revenue function. So take an example. My head of America's field marketing is mapped two in a box with the VP of sales for Americas on the sales side. My head of partner marketing is aligned two in a box with the partnership director in that region or for that particular discipline. And then my head of inbound marketing is partnered two in a box with the SDR manager, if there exists one, or the BDR manager. What is this two in a box? It's one of the management frameworks that was originated back in the day, early 2010s, and has been practiced in many different management organizations, including IBM, where I was fortunate to learn this thing. We might have heard this term called pods. In simplicity, it's nothing but a pod. Basically, all we are trying to do is create pods. These are virtual pods. We are not changing the dotted line hierarchy of our people, but we are saying, look, we'll create these pods and work together in the first piece, right? What it delivers at the end of the day is it delivers our focus on the actual metrics which matter than the vanity metrics. How many times we have heard this term called, hey, we are delivering MQLs, sales isn't convinced, we are going back and forth on the definition of MQL, SQLs, and there you go, right? Similarly, how many times we have seen that, hey, we are creating a pipeline, but it's not converting, we don't know whose fault it is, or we don't know where the ball is getting dropped. Leaving all of that, when you combine this model, basically we align the accountability. In my previous example, the head of field marketing here in Americas and the head of sales, VP of sales in Americas, now their joint metric that they're after is the pipeline generated for the region, right? How they get there, they work collaboratively on that, right? So that's really the first step on this one. The second step overall is now you focus on your external customer, which is your persona or ICP that you're going to, however, at a much deeper level, not at the initial ICP that we define based on the title and whatnot, but you really dig into the details of whichever tool you are using, whether it's Zoom Info, 6sense, or you might have an agency, in terms of the actual audience at the quantity level, combining both your CRM as well as your external sources of data. And you come down to a place where you have clarity around one, here are X million contacts or audience people that I have that I'm going to go after. Number two, here's how I can segment them, because we want to make sure that ultimately we are segmenting them, whatever criteria we have it based on the market size we are going after, account size, whatnot, persona, and then we are targeting them at scale. That's the third step. That's where a lot of MarTech and AdTech come into picture. And that's where a lot of innovation about generative AI is now starting to showcase, which I've been experiencing. So yeah,
So
I'll
let
take
me go
pause here.
back to a couple of things I just want to put punctuation points on, because I certainly know when you're as the CMO, when you are presenting to a board of directors and your CRO is right next to you, and you are going back at you are presenting one deck and one set of revenue targets, you're in a lot better shape than. And so it totally the alignment that you're describing makes a lot of sense. And it's funny because this gets into so many different aspects of being a CMO, but one of them is how do you organize your structure? And what you're suggesting is that structure really you need to be thinking about from sit next to your CRO and say, okay, how are you structuring? How are we structuring? How are they complementing and how are they aligning? And I think that's such an important thing. And I know that folks are here to listen to how we're going to apply generative AI, but the key thing here is if your structure isn't right, how you apply these tools is not going to be right either. So you're not going to get to a predictable marketing engine by jumping into generative AI, I think is an important part. And then the audience part of this, the aligning on the audience sort of makes sense, goes back to what Forrester and Matt Selheimer said in a recent huddle, just thinking about your customer-centric and target-centric teams, because ultimately this comes back to marketing knowing more about the customer than anybody else. And that's one of your sort of core sources of strength. Okay, then we're going to scale it. Now, we're into it. We've got the structure. We're aligned. We've got our audiences. All of that was true before LLMs. Now we got LLMs. Let's talk about it and get to a real life example.
Yep. So now you think about it, a lot of people that we have mostly experienced some form or shape of ChatGPT or a similar LLM, whichever is our favorite, like be it Claude from Anthropic or Gemini now, earlier Bard from Google or whatnot. The way I think about the generative AI for marketing organization is in three ways that we can use generative AI. And there are, in marketing, we like acronyms. So I came up with my own. There are three P's here, right? First P is productivity. Second P is product or customer innovation. And third P is predictability, right? Now, let me elaborate on each of them. Until now, most people, if not all, have been focusing a lot more on the productivity side of it, rightfully so, right? Because hey, you think about ChatGPT, what does it do? It becomes your intelligent assistant, it becomes your helping hand, the knowledge powerhouse. The more you use it, the more you like it, the more you learn about it, the more that LLM adjusts with you. There you go, right? And the use cases within the marketing so
Right. And so we've had lots and lots of sessions on the productivity, whether it's designing faster, whether it's creating content faster, and content could be any number of things, or it's taking a large piece of content or content that you've had and reiterating, if you will. So productivity, and I think most folks are still at that phase, right? That's where a lot of the energy is, and it's all good. And there's the nice part of that is CMOs can do that stuff themselves. They can learn it, they can see it, they can get their team to it. The other things that you're starting to get into are going to be bigger,
they are
right?
bigger,
So
much bigger.
let's talk about product first. Before we get to predictability, just quickly, what does that product and customer innovation look like?
Yeah, think about it, right? If you think about three or four pillars of the marketing organization, and depending upon the organization, they could be three, they could be more, right? One of the bigger pillars is your product marketing, your product research, your customer marketing organization, right? Now, imagine the power of tools like LLMs, not for the content development, but some of the things we are already hearing happening in the market. One, I'll give you a real example. With my current company, back in June last year, we were in the midst of launching our first self-serve product, right? And I was going through my own playbook of here's the product launch playbook. Believe it or not, I was able to do most of those steps in 2 days, which I could have taken easily 2 weeks or even longer, right? And we are a lean team, we are an early startup. How did it happen, right? Number one, most of the product research, market research, competitive research is addressed by a number of LLMs or their combinations. So for example, I fed into ChatGPT at the time, and at the time it was still Bard. Here is my ideal customer profile that I'm looking to target with this launch. I gave them title. I even uploaded my HubSpot data of a sample because we were pretty open, and I'll talk about it later if someone has concern. Like I didn't have much fear about my data getting lost or being used in the wrong way because we use LLMs for our own product development and we know how secure it could be. Yes, at the times could be some challenges. So I even uploaded my own customer data and said, look, this is my ICP. I want to target that at large. Give me a couple of things. And this was my product launch playbook. I said, give me the content which is personalized by segment as well as by persona. It gave me that. I didn't use that as is. What I used that for was creating the battle card for my sales team, for my SDR team, because I knew the day we will launch our product, there will be an inflow of hand raisers coming in, the website visitors coming in, the calls being scheduled and whatnot. So I converted that into battle cards for my team right then and there. did the sales element part well, right? Secondly, overall, when I had that market knowledge, I started preparing a lot of customer segmentation around whether my validation is better than the other. So for example, I said to the chat GPT environment that we had is, look, here is my G2 list of competitors, right? How should I position myself better than what I'm doing today, the same script? And then I was getting a lot of validation at the time. So essentially what I'm trying to tell you here is that is where a lot of innovation comes into the play, where right now the productivity is the speed that we are going after. The intelligence or the knowledge is the next frontier that people start to explore once they realize, look, there's only enough we can do on the content development and then the overall productivity side of it, and now the knowledge actually triumphs. So I'll take pause there, Drew. Happy to go into
Yeah,
details.
no, and I just want to, for folks that are listening afterwards or here, that I think it's worth going back and listening to what Andy Crestodina showed us in terms of how you do gap analysis with data, and what Lisa Adams showed us in terms of how to do some of the things that, the data scraping that Ajay just described is what Lisa went into depth on. Okay, so now we get into this new world where we haven't talked about this at all, is predictability. And I have no idea where you're going with this, so let's get in to it.
Yeah. So now when you think about productivity, right, this is the third pillar, whether you call demand generation or your revenue marketing teams function, right? Here, at least for now, there is no silver bullet like ChatGPT that I have experienced people can apply. But even better, there are two things which are working extremely well for us to leverage that can expedite literally that predictability achievement by multifold. The first one is the native inbuilt AI capabilities of the marketing tools that we already use today. And the second one is the automation power of connecting a lot of these tools with the chat GPT like LLMs, right? Let me go into details.
Sure.
So we all see that every week now, most other products that we use, they're coming up with like, hey, they have the AI built in. Salesforce came up with their Slack AI integration. Now they are fully AI integration everywhere. You have HubSpot coming up with the integration of AI. You have Salesloft, the sales development tool, primarily coming up with their own AI version called Rhythm. The list goes on. What is the key message here? The key message is, whether we like it or not, whether we want it or not, these products will be enhanced with the AI in their native functionality. And it will come in twofold. Number one, conversation. Instead of us searching, typing, pulling reports out of these tools, I know earlier somebody on the call was saying that the use case was pulling the call script information. These tools will have the lowest hanging benefit of search it, find it. Now, obviously, the capabilities of the benefits will vary depending upon how sophisticated the AI functionalities are, right? So the number one thing is becoming really expert or being that first mover advantage pro in these tools AI capability can change the landscape. And I'm happy to give exactly the scenario that we use it.
Yeah,
Secondly,
well, wait, let's just pause there for a second. So, two thoughts. One, the first mover thing. I laugh because, like, we use the Zoom recaps that are created by generative AI. And by the way, sometimes they are comical in terms of their ability to sort of they string things together. But still, people still marvel at that, and it's nice that. But also wanted to share that, and I know our team will find it. We did a CMO Huddle Studio with Allison Havner of Trust Radius, among others, where we talked about how they were doing the integration. So these folks are doing it, and it is going to make them more powerful. And part of this is also just reminding folks that in an ideal world, we're not adding technology, right, to our marketing stacks necessarily. We're taking advantage of what we already have. Anyway, now continue with more specific examples. That'd be great.
yeah, so before I move on to the automation, let me give you the specific example, right? So earlier we were using Zoom Info. A lot of people use Zoom Info for either the lead enrichment, identity, clarification, pushing it through the systems, the data, connecting with their CRMs and whatnot. Later on, my team found out a tool called Apollo. For people who are not using it, it's a competitor of Zoom Info, but much beyond. So what we realized was initially we were using it for, yes, the lead enrichment, pushing it through different things. However, it started coming up with the AI technology where that email generation, what a lot of people use for ChatGPT, that came embedded. So all of our sales dev reps, basically now they can, at the power of a click button, can generate a very sophisticated email sequence that probably they wouldn't do it. Now, think about a global organization where you might not have everybody from the native local language coming into play, right? And especially functions like sales dev, business dev, there might be some efficiencies of bringing those resources from somewhere non front region like Americas. That was a power thing for us. Number two, the sequences had the reminders overall AI generated. Third one, they started pulling the lead score or the prioritization based on the ICP that they knew we were feeding, and the list kept going on and on, right? If we had not upgraded to that module, which was barely any financial hurdle for us, we would have still be relying on a lot of the manual effort. So now here my sales team, my SDR team, they can go in the day they open their dashboard, they will see, okay, here are the 5 different accounts or the people that you should prioritize. Here's the email list ready. There's even an integration with LinkedIn, lowest hanging fruit. Similarly, HubSpot just came out with their AI offering, right? Very nascent stages still. But again, the point I'm trying to drive is a lot of people that rely on creating a copy in ChatGPT and putting it into multiple places, well, unless you are writing like an amazing 10, 20 pager PDF asset that will have a 7, 8, 10 months shelf life, you don't want to flip between the tools. You can get that capability right then and there, right? Secondly, we started encountering a couple of tools like what we call the multi-channel attribution model. There's a tool called factors.ai. Now, it's so amazing because a lot of our dollars actually go on media, and we don't know many times which created what for us. Now, this AI tool again created a lot of that attribution for us. Sure, attribution is never perfect, as we all know, it's a lot of subjectivity, but still now I know where a lot of dollars that we are spending have been generating good value for us or not. And the list keeps going on. And the beauty is I can very confidently say in the next 1 or 2 months, most every tools that we use will have the AI capability. And if we just focused on mastering some of that, we will be much ahead in what I call the predictability curve, because now we are talking about not following up on every single lead, but the ones which have higher chances of converting, not sending any copy, but ones which have much personalized chance of receiving, and so on and so forth.
And let me pause you there because I think this is a really interesting part. I've got a podcast coming out, a recording that I did with Noah Breyer, and one of the things that you really need to understand what LLMs are good for and what they're not. But one of the things that they're really good for is recognizing patterns at scale, right? They can just look at massive amounts of information and see a pattern that you didn't. So the fact that you could you've got 500 leads in the pipeline right now, and you could look at the ones that have the highest probability or predictability based on an analysis that you did of your last month's or most recent conversions. And I know that marketers have been trying to do that for a long, long time. But when you do it manually and you look at it, well, what are the patterns? Well, they're in this industry or they had this title, but you might be missing some other factor that these tools can do. And I'm wondering if that's what you're seeing, is that these tools are going to be able to be much, much better at going through all this data and finding the pattern of the folks that are likely to close.
Yeah.
We talk about intent data. That just says maybe this person will buy. What we really want to know is buy. Person that buys. Is that what you're talking about, or I'm just living in my own little Drew land?
Yeah, I think it's slightly different, Drew. So as of today, like
Right.
March 14th, we aren't at a point where these tools' native AI capability will tell us precisely the type of predictive power we need on their own, basically. It's the same old data problem that we have, i.e., our data is fragmented. our CRM data to the marketing campaign data to our web data to our customer product data. And that's why you have big tools like Google's BigQuery and Snowflake and all of that coming in. So that becomes almost like another data analytics project. I don't see that happening right now where somebody's coming. What I'm trying to tell is the predictability even out of the existing tools based on the functions, SDR, sales, marketing campaigns, that goes to the roof basically. Like, this is amazing. We haven't seen this before. Until now, we have been, and again, going into the SDR example, we have been relying on the SDR saying, yes, I sent a great copy. It was personalized. I did my best. I expect this lead will convert into a meeting in the next X number of days. Now, all of that can be done by the tool legwork. So our conversation with the SDR is, okay, what is the intelligence about our product that you are bringing in those discussions, in those emails? That is powerful, right? Go from the transaction to much more value.
Right. So in that moment, so again, I'm trying to sort of get at certain things that might happen. So I'm an SDR. I know a little bit about this person. They are in our ICP, but there's some variable that comes up that I could then put into to create whatever that next piece of communication that has a higher likelihood of progressing the deal. Is that what you're talking about?
Indeed. Yeah, you
Okay.
put, as an SDR, they put their intelligence. Yes.
Right. And going back to my earlier point in which you corrected me on, and I appreciate that. It's all about data. All of this is about data. If the data is bad, it's bad. But if you can get to the point where you really do have good broad data, then the potential to do some of these analyses that I'm describing about, because the biggest problem I think that most CMOs in B2B have right now is that deal times are forever, right? 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and the cycles are stretching. So if you could early on get, intent is too broad. If there's another level of intent that would help us, and that generative AI can somehow or other help us see more clearly and then help us get to close, boy, that would be a huge thing.
Indeed.
Okay, I'm still dreaming. That's what I'm doing here. Okay, so let's so the next part of this I think is really about connecting, right? Because we were talking
That's
about
right.
our databases is not, they're not talking, and so therefore if our databases aren't talking, we can't do any of the analysis that I'm talking about. So let's talk about connecting these things.
Yeah, and I think that's where the biggest power comes in. Like any demand or revenue engine, basically, it is so powerful to use a simple tool like Zapier if people are not using it, right? Or whatever their workflow automation tool they are, their favorite tool is that they're using. What Zapier does for us, basically, and I'm giving my example, we use something that we developed in ChatGPT, pass that back into HubSpot or some other tool, if it is Salesloft or Apollo, and then let it run. So it's almost like handshake, handoff, and then circling back again and coming to you with the feedback loop. So powerful, because now basically what we are saying is, one, we are using each and every tool's capabilities to the maximum with their AI, right? So from Martech tool to the HubSpot tool to sales development, and then you are connecting. So almost you are building a feedback loop. So in our example, what we did was we used Drift Chat, Drift's data of the information, we push it back to our HubSpot database, all the conversation data. Now, based on that conversation data, we connect with ChatGPT with all of the load file that we gave, and we said, look, these are the types of conversations we are having. What should an ideal script for my SDR be if we are doing that? And then we get an ideal script, the type of questions that our SDR can be prepared to answer nonetheless. You take it back to the next level. Once the SDR has a call, the call script data is now getting analyzed and coming down to, again, the generative power, summarization. What are the top 2 issues that we are finding in the last 3, 4, 5 weeks patterns of questions or conversation? And therefore, we are now building assets which address just that. It's like, how are you different from your competitor, right? So really what you're doing is using these kind of automated workflows, you are making sure that you're much more powerful than just the basic isolated information. So happy to go into more details if you like.
Yeah, it's so interesting because the GPTs can sort of fit into various phases of this thing, but you have to be thinking, oh, we could use these tools. We could do it. Otherwise, we're just going to keep doing it the way we've always been doing it, right? Which is waiting for the BDR to. This is where, again, I'm trying to get to pattern recognition. So you've got a bunch of BDRs and SDRs having conversations, right? And the old way was you would talk to them and say, what are the problems and what are the objections? And you're getting some of that through their lens, and they're, sometimes defensive. And even if you had the calls recorded, somebody had to go through the transcripts. Not anymore, right?
I will add one more thing there, Drew. So that was one example where you have an automated platform like Zapier. With the origination of generative AI, there are so many other small platforms up and coming which are focused just on workflow automation, whether you want to call process automation, workflow automation, or functional automation. I'm biased, but my own organization, we are meant for that. So essentially, we are generative AI for automation. And there are many, like I said, so people don't have to look only one. Essentially, what it does is these tools help you automate your existing flow in a much faster way than until now. So literally, the example what I'm giving you, we looked at our revenue process, the pipeline process. Lead came in every Friday. We review the leads with our sales team, with our revenue operations team. Then we do some feedback loop. We go follow up on them. The whole cycle continues. We automated that with the power of our own tool because we wanted to drink our own Kool-Aid. We automated that process to the point now the lead's first touch point to the last touch point of when we think the lead was touched with the salespeople, what was the feedback, that is all automated, right? Even to the point that the nurture emails are going automatically based on the moment the salesperson says, yes, this was touched, it is qualified, the nurture emails are starting, like small things like that. Now, on the surface, it might look like, well, we are doing it for a long time. The how has changed. How we are automating it, it has become completely fast. We are talking about the matter of days, if not hours, as compared to the weeks or months that we used to do it.
Right.
Very powerful.
And the thing that I just want to remind listeners that is you may never have used Workato or Zapier or any of these other integration tools. But if, let's say, you wanted to go use one, you'd never did it. The first thing I would do is say, hey, ChatGPT, tell me step by step how I use this tool in order to connect this to that. And it will pretty much come up with a step-by-step thing. And in fact, you could do that in any aspect in your life that you've never done before. Like, what are the things that I need to know, or what are the common mistakes? And then after it shows you the step-by-steps, the next thing you can do is, what about write the code for me? Right? I mean, this is the mind-boggling thing that we're in, is that DIY. And the liberating thing for CMO, I'm not saying that you should be programming, I'm not saying that you should be, but you have the ability now to imagine in a very different universe than you did before, that you can start to think about these problems a lot more expansively. You can go to your tech stack and you say, okay, what's your AI roadmap? Not just, hey, what are you going to do for me? But what's your AI roadmap? Because there's got to be an assumption that there is some integration that's going to be coming that's going to make this stuff faster. And I do believe that it will be standard in 2 years, but right now, everybody who is applying these and using these things has a slight competitive advantage. One thing we're not going to talk about, but I wish we could, which is, I think there's an opportunity on a go-to-market basis for CMOs to drive the agenda, and that these tools can enable it. But it's such a big topic that we'll have to do it another day. I do want to make sure that there's anybody who's listening here with us, if anybody had any questions and you haven't put them in chat, or raise your hand. Oh, Bindu, come on camera, Bindu, just jump in here.
Hey Ajay, I mean, this is phenomenal. am taking down so many notes right now. So I have a question on how are you showcasing ROI? And the use cases of LLM that I talked about was one was on the efficiency. We are just mining Salesforce data. This is a very unique business that we have, where the workforce, which is kind of, it's the blue collar travelers, we cater to their lodging needs. So very difficult to understand, build a total addressable market for that business. But this business has been in existence for, over 20 years, and salespeople have kind of touched all the leads before. So we are mining the Salesforce information to get, right? Information about like who travels, etc. And the second one is from the call transcripts. What do we learn? And that's more of a lead scoring, use case. So the biggest one that I'm facing in the organization is what is the ROI that I can show through, AI-based tools rather than just using, your regression model.
Indeed.
So
Great question. Good to meet you, Bindu. Two things. So first, I have personally been putting the categories, the three that I described for my ROI. So it's like productivity gain, X percentage. Second is the product innovation. Third is the predictability. From my experience, I can tell you as much as the CFO or the budget owner loves to hear the first two, they will always talk about the third one. Mostly in my experience, they're like, we love the productivity. There is no benchmark. There's only if we had more people, all of that. And then predictability is basically, look, if you don't have this tool today, how much time, how many people that you will need versus what I can do for you today. So that's how I've been doing it. Your second part of the questions in terms of the call script, like I said, Bindu, most of these tools have now started incorporating the cool transcripts. My personal recommendation to whoever I talk these days is, I personally suggest don't try to work with your existing tools if they are not AI ready. Rather, make an ask for a new tool, i.e., don't be incremental, be ambitious. Gong, for example, amazing tool, and literally every other tool that does this calls from SDR sales, they are now providing transcript tool. As a matter of fact, they are providing transcript, the call to action items, follow up reminders. I would rather put a request to the CFO saying like, look, state of the art tools are here. I want to rather go there. You bring up the third most important point, which is about your data. That is one challenge. For example, if you have already a lot of historical data, if you want to run through that hurdle even we faced, it took us a little bit of time to bring that into one database and solve it. But I can talk about that offline with you.
wonderful.
Was that helpful?
It was, yeah. It's been a battle trying to prove the ROI with literally so much budget cuts in 2024. That's why I'm kind of haven't moved beyond the POC stage yet.
I've been there before.
Interesting. Thank you for the question, Bindu. ROI is always hard with marketing anyway, right? Because it gets back to the questions of attribution and sourcing and all these things that we don't do. And a lot of this is about productivity gains, right? As opposed to even, I know in innovation is harder to score predictability. Even predictability is hard to score because it's a promise in the future. But I think that more importantly, if I'm a CMO and I'm facing a 15% budget cut, I'm hoping like heck I can make up, at least on the productivity side, that 15% through using these tools. I had a very specific question on some of these things because I laughed. I mentioned at the top of the hour that some of the interpretations of the Zoom calls, these meeting notes that you get, are hilarious because they take two different ideas and merge them together in what people are talking about and what the subject is. Whereas if you just get the audio recording and you put it into an Otter.ai, you get a 98% or a Nota, you get a really high quality transcript that you could then mine. So I do think that basic thing is really important and worth testing, right? All right, but we need to wrap up. So let's talk about, why don't you wrap up with 2 do's and 1 don't for CMOs when it comes to using generative AI to help build a revenue marketing engine?
Yeah, sure. I think that two to-dos will be one, be a champion of generative AI within your organization. As a marketer, like literally, we are at the forefront of this innovation. And I believe marketers who do that today, year from now, they'll be so glad and proud that they did it. The second one is rely on your community of peer marketers, your peer group of advisors, friends that are doing something similar, right? The space is moving so fast. You want to be in the know-how and you want to learn what things really worked for your peers versus what did not, so that you can put your right investments, as we heard in the previous subject, well. So that's my two to-dos. One don't is don't get carried away by this overhyped topic of data sensitivity, privacy, security concerns with the LLMs. I think they are pretty responsible in most cases with that. Give them some benefit of doubt if there is a mistake time to time that you hear. But it's our benefit at the end of the day if we use them. This is back in the day cloud scenario in 2008 getting repeated. So the early adopters will have much bigger fruits to bear.
And I just want to put a couple of punctuations. First of all, I did not pay Ajay to mention that you need to rely on your community, but yes, you do. And the other one is, you're so right about the 2008 cloud. Everybody, oh, we can't go to the cloud. We're going to be worried about that. I remember when the internet first showed up, and there were companies like Kraft that would not allow their employees to have access to it because they were worried they would play games or whatever and do embarrassing things. And this, sometimes you have to sort of have a leap of faith and say, this is not a bright, shiny object. This is a transformative moment. And you can fight that or you can sort of embrace it. But one of the things is, as marketing leaders, to lead change, there hasn't been an opportunity to lead change like this in a long time. Not probably since we went digital. So, all right, where can people find you, Ajay?
People can find me on my LinkedIn, or they can email me directly, firstname.lastname@gmail.com, or they can always reach me through CMO Huddles.
That's it. All right. Ajay Manglani, thank you so much for your input, your insights. I think we could go a long, long time on this conversation. Obviously, we look forward to having you back for more huddles.